Hi, this is Gina Coomer. I am currently our coordinator for leadership and student organization development here in the Office of Student Involvement. By the time you watch this video, I will be transitioning over to the Block Career Center to be their employee relations manager. But for the purposes of this video, I will be recording about the annual budget process. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can begin here shortly. All right, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about annual budgets for the 2023-2024 academic year. We're going to be chatting about how a student organization gets money to spend, annual budget versus event by event budget, any terms to know that the Office of Student Involvement uses in helping our students secure funds, what itemization looks like, a thorough walkthrough of the SAFC guidelines, any key dates or calendar reminders for you all to be successful for this year, tracking your budget, and other resources we have to offer. So funding comes in two ways for our registered student organizations. Let me also mention that I keep saying registered student organizations. All of our 346 student organizations on campus are considered registered. That means that they go through a process through Root Groups, rootgroups.umkc.edu, that allows our Office of Student Involvement in the university to know that they are affiliated and want to participate in all the benefits of being a recognized organization on campus. This means that they could request funds, request space on campus, use the university's name and the like. So there are a ton of benefits to being a registered student organization. And so this conversation is geared towards those that are registered. If you don't know if your student organization is registered yet, again, that is just through Root Groups. You'll go to your student groups page. There should be a blue notification towards the dashboard of your Root Groups page that says to get re-registered. And then you'll just fill in the blanks, include all the supporting documents and supporting folks. And then those are due by September 9th. So the second Friday after school starts. So please keep in mind to get registered prior to annual budget submission or receiving any funds. So please keep that in mind. But again, going back to funding and how student organizations get monies to spend. All student organizations, whenever registered, they get sort of two bank accounts. So I like to kind of refer to them as. So the first one is the student government allocations, or also known as your SAF, student activity fee. Every student pays into the student activity fee. It comes into a big pot, and then it has a first allocation that goes towards any services on campus that are for all of our students. So going to student health and wellness for free, that is covered through your student activity fee, things like that. And then there is another batch that goes to student government and the student activity fee committee, and then that is what gets distributed to our registered student organizations. So this account is used in that academic year based off of the students that participate and put money into the student activity fee, and therefore it is recommended or required that that money then goes back to the students for them to be able to have their activities. There is a committee, so you'll also hear SAF and SAFC, throwing out some of those terms to know already, but SAFC is a committee that is comprised of every council on campus and supports as like the governing body that helps ensure that the student activity fee is used when students are requesting funds or spending funds. So during an annual budget, student organizations are able to request $5,000. Councils are able to request up to $15,000. And then there is also an option, a third option called event by event budgets, and we'll get back to that, but that is considered blank. And that is because we won't know those allocations until after we complete the annual budgets. So annual budgets happen in the summer. We'll talk about that timeline, but those happen in the summer. summer. And then after those allocations are distributed, then whatever is left over is averaged and able to identify a cap for what that could look like. But this account, the SAF account, this is going to be kind of like your checking account. You request money from it, you get money from it, you have to spend it often. And all the funds from this account only go on an academic year to follow when the student spent that money. So typically annual budgets are distributed out August 1st, and then you would have to spend all that money up until the end of May in order to have that academic cycle fulfilled. And then after that deadline, it is swept away into the reserves, whatever is left unspent. Next is self-generated revenue. This is kind of like on the flip side, that savings account. So if your registered student organization brings in any money, this could be through fundraising or donation, individual membership dues, things like that. Those funds can be deposited with our Office of Student Involvement and put into your self-generated revenue account. These funds in this account are used as to your discretion for supplemental funds, for things that can't be funded through the student activity fee, things like that. And whatever, again, is left unspent stays in there. So if a person from your organization deposited $200 years ago and you guys didn't spend it, you guys have until forever to spend that all the way to zero. So something to keep in mind, if you don't know what your self-generated revenue is, just connect with the Office of Student Involvement and they'll be able to give you a balance of that. So you kind of have, as a registered student organization, a checking account and a savings account that both are operated through our Office of Student Involvement as well as the Student Government Association. So we're going to talk a lot about annual budgets. Annual budgets are how they sound, everything that you want to do for the entire academic year. Councils are able to request up to $15,000. Student organizations are able to request up to $5,000, and they have to detail all things that you want to do for the entire academic year. This includes any event, travel, supplies, material, etc. Let's go ahead and say a student organization requests $6,000 from an annual budget. Automatically, that budget will be denied as it does not meet that minimum or that maximum requirement. So please be mindful of that. I had a few student organizations last year submit annual budgets for like $4,938. Yes, they could have requested up to $5,000, but they got close, and that was then able to be reviewed. So we do appreciate that. Again, only registered student organizations and councils can apply for an annual budget. So keep in mind that by the time that your annual budget is due, you also have to be a registered student organization in order for the Student Activity Fee Committee to review your annual budget. Allocations, distribution, and communication will go out August 1st, and student orgs can start spending after that date. So August 1st, you find out everything that you received in funds for the full remainder of the year, and you can start requesting a P card or a purchase request to make those spendings happen. On the flip side, an event by event budget is for anyone that didn't want to do an annual budget. Annual budgets, I totally get, can have some perks like $5,000 and like being able to get those funds by August 1st. But if your student organization doesn't really know what they want to do yet, wants to wait until everyone has their opinions, see if there's any newcomers that join the group that have some fresh ideas, that's perfectly fine. We do have an event by event process that allows you to request as the events come up. But this allocations is, as I mentioned earlier, dependent upon what the annual budgets looked like. So during my time here in the Office of Student Involvement, the 2021 to 2022 academic year's event by event budget was capped at $3,100 in what a student organization could request. In the 2022-2023 academic year, there was a cap of $3,800. So there was a big difference in those funds, and that was just dependent upon those years. So that is one challenge that a lot of our student organizations see, is that just the unknown amount that they could receive in an event by event budget. Another thing that stumps up our students is this timeline that I posted right here. So if we start up here, this is our section in which SAFC will be meeting. All of the committees meetings are open to the public. They are on those dates listed at 6 p.m. in the student government chambers. But let's go ahead and use this first date as an example. So that first date that SAFC will be meeting is the 28th of August. On that meeting, we would need to have any event by event budget submitted by midnight on the 23rd of August. These budgets that would be reviewed if successfully submitted by the 23rd will be for any travel or events happening between September 18th through October 9th. So in that window of period, that is when these budgets can be eligible for review and receiving funds. That next meeting would then be happening on September 18th. Similarly, they would have to be due by the 13th of September. It would be for anything happening between the 9th of October and the 23rd of October. When we receive these allocations for event by event budgets, they are just distributed in a specific amount so that we don't over allocate, so that we don't give away all of our money in December and we don't have anything for January or vice versa. One thing that the Student Activity Fee Committee decided for this next year, and I'm thrilled about it. Typically in the past, student organizations that received anything from an annual budget could not also request for an event by event budget. So what that means is that they got what they got, and if they didn't get the full $5,000, they still had to spend what they had to spend. And if they, but like, let's go ahead and say a student organization only got $1,000 from an annual budget, that wouldn't happen, but let's go ahead and say they did, then they only got $1,000, but then if they looked over at the event by event budget and could see people could get $3,800, then that super doesn't seem fair, right? So for this year, if you receive less in an annual budget than the event by event cap is, you can request up to it. So we put in there, for example, if a student organization gets $2,000, but the eligibility to receive through an event by event was $3,000, that student org can request up to $1,000 extra or through the event by event budget to receive that limit. Again, determination of this amount would be set after August 1, after all the annual budgets are distributed. All right, good terms to know. Starting off with a MO code. This is sort of a routing number for that checking and that savings account. So a MO code is a number that is attached to let us know if it's coming from the student activity fee or if it's coming from self-generated revenue. You have two different MO codes, one for SAF and one for SGR. Pardon me. These are located on the main page of Brew Groups. If you go to the homepage, kind of scroll down towards the middle, there's a button that says Student Organizations MO Codes. You would then search to find yours, and then you would attach that to a purchase request, a P card request, or a room reservation. Having that MO code handy is super helpful. So please remember first what that is and then where to find it. Now I just threw out the words P card and purchase request. A P card is a literal credit card that you can request from the Office of Student Involvement for your purchasing. This would be for anything that is under that is either $999.99 or less. So anything under $1,000, you would need to fill out a P card request. Again, located on the main page of Brew Groups, close to where that student organization's MO code button is, but it'll say for P cards. And then the next thing is a purchase request. This is for any funds that are going to be over $1,000. Typically, we have to request a check or have to get a limit increase on our P cards for any purchase over $1,000. And in order to do that, we would need to fill out a purchase request. Also, purchase requests would need to be filled out for anything for purchase from Amazon. So if you are ordering through our Amazon business account, you would need to include those links for Amazon on a purchase request. The last thing as a reminder, is SAF versus SGR. Self-generated revenue, kind of that savings account, SGR. SAF, student activity fee, asked for by an annual or an event by event budget coming from student government, SAF. Okay, let's dive into how to make an annual budget. Annual budgets can be found first and foremost on Brew Groups. So you would log into brewgroups.umkc.edu. You would find your student organization underneath the group tab, and then on that upper left-hand side of the screen. Then if you are an officer, then you would see similar things that I have screenshot there. This is from Student Government Association as an example, but since I'm an officer of that group, and also you can see that cute little re-registration button right there. Woo! So if you need to re-register, that's what that would look like. But for an annual budget, you would then, if you are the officer that is eligible to request an annual budget, which is our presidents, vice presidents, treasurers, you would then go to this little money tab that's located on the left-hand side of that manage dashboard. Next, you would see 3 lines. Here in a few weeks, that will actually only just be this council annual budget line. But for the purposes of this training, you would make sure that you hit and it'll say either student organization or council, depending upon what determination your group is. And then you would hit that, and then on the next screen, so you would click on that button. Then on the next screen, there is a button on the upper right hand side that says create budget request. You can kind of see it in the foreground of right here. It says create budget request, but then you would be taken to a form that is one of 2 steps. Please, please, please be sure to fill out all the steps in order to have your budget be considered and considered complete. So I filled in this form and said, hey, this is a sample just for you guys. So what you're doing, a description of what you're doing, where it's at, all those things. And there's this little button that says documents. This is going to be super helpful for any of you guys that are looking into really itemizing your budgets, which will be super helpful for SAFC to determine your allocations amounts. So then after filling out and completing part 1, you would then be taken to step 2, where you get actual drop downs that say like supplies and materials, food, things like that. You would then hit amount requested, so how much you're asking for from the student activity fee. Amount financed by groups. I typically don't recommend students don't fill that out just because it looks like y'all need more, but truly you're only putting in that amount requested. That's all you need. So I would omit that unless you feel like you absolutely need to show that you're bringing in any funds. I usually would recommend putting it as a note, which you can put to the right there. So that is the steps to create a budget. I'm going to now show you 2 examples of annual budgets that were submitted last year, one by a council, one by a student organization, and they were both accepted. Starting off with MSOC, or the Multicultural Student Organization Council. It's a super far back, but I wanted you to see the length of it. And this was all submitted as one singular request. So they put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of these different line items based off of what they were needing. They put in their amounts, they put in the notes to say, hey, check out my attached document. So the committee decided to, and this was their attached document. They said, hey, line item 1 is for the MSOC retreat. We are getting this much money. This is where we requested it from. We're hoping to get it from. This is where we came up with that number. And going on with line item 2, 3, 4, etc. So then they showed the committee that 1, it followed the guidelines in itemization. 2, followed it in their amounts per person, per food, things like that. Since there was some food, as well as recruitment with giveaways and things like that. So it definitely did follow the SAFC guidelines, but we were only able to identify that because of this document. Now, a different option was through Psi Omega Dental Fraternity as our example. They decided to put 15 different budget requests. And since it was all still in that student organization annual budget section, then the committee was able to see these budget requests all under one student organization. So even though it was 15, it wasn't like each one could limit $5,000. It was their total amount requested, $5,000. And this is how they got to that $5,000. So they're saying, hey, we want a welcome back event. This is the date. This is the people. This is what we're getting and how we got to those amounts to get to that total. And the committee could be like, actually, yes, that is included. That's included. That all adds up to $8 per person, whatever. And it was at least within the month guidelines too. So they were able to see it itemized in a different way, not in a supporting document, but through this. So even though both of those budgets were submitted different, they were both still fully funded. So I always recommend that whatever makes sense for your organization to organize your request, just whatever makes sense. If it is this way that MSOC did, great. Include all that fantastic itemization. If it's what Psi Omega did and put different requests, great. Whatever makes sense for you to be able to read, as well as for the committee to be able to read. Now, I've been throwing around the word itemization a lot. And what it means is the specific amount towards a specific item and location that you're getting it from. So whenever you go to Walmart and purchase things, does it say, hey, you got $300 worth of things from Walmart? Or does it say 200 of it was on Pringle chips? I don't know. But it definitely tells you the item that you got, what it was, and how much it was for, and then clearly the receipt came from Walmart. So when you are making your itemization for your budget, it is super helpful to list it all out for two reasons. Number one, it helps the SAFC committee have a better determination in their budget decision. It helps them say, hey, this is all good. This all follows the guidelines. We would be happy to support this budget and provide funds. In addition, number two, it helps you then with planning. So I would submit a budget. This is how much I'm hoping to get. I would get that budget approved. And now I know I have $300 to be able to spend on the things that I asked for. Right? So it definitely helps out in the future. This reminds me also to mention that if a student organization requested monies for an event and then that event did not happen, that is okay. Life happens. But we still encourage our student organizations to still spend their money to zero. So if you want to plan a different event using those funds, do it. As long as it follows the guidelines, spend it. Please, please, please be mindful of spending. Now, we're going to walk through the guidelines. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch over to our guidelines. If you have any questions about any of the documents I've shown you, please connect with either your comptroller or OSI, and we will give those contacts in the very end. So here is a fresh copy of the student activity fee guidelines for the 2023-2024 academic year. We are super proud of what the committee put together, and we hope that you guys also enjoy it. First and foremost, it starts off with the things that the student activity fee funds cannot be used for. Student activity fee funds, as I mentioned, are bought into by the students and should benefit solely UMKC students. So please be mindful of that when putting in a request to have a faculty luncheon. We do love our faculty on campus, but unfortunately they cannot benefit from the student activity fee funds as they did not contribute to it. And similarly, we can't just give out funds to one person when everyone else put into it too, right? So I can't give one student a $15 gift card without having to then give every other student a $15 gift card. So a lot of these items are very much personal use items. Another one that is challenging is anything for philanthropies or fundraising charity events. We'd love to support our students that are wanting to give back to the community. However, our funds cannot be used to do that because then that shows that bias towards that philanthropy or fundraising event, and that makes it challenging. So please be mindful when you're creating your budget request, thinking about the things that you can request. First thing I would ask is, can we ask for that? One thing that the committee put in this year was a cause for inflation. And so the Student Government Association has tasked SAFC to be mindful of what the inflation rates look like and the national inflation rates. And we have adjusted our budget to accommodate for that. So between the 2022-2023 academic year to the 2023-2024 academic year, inflation rates have been set at 10%. And so every number component was increased by 10%. And I'll show that here in a little bit. Allocation information, this is something important. As I said, spending is important. This is why the committee has seen a lot of student organizations request money, but then never spend it. And this is challenging when that stifles the opportunity from other student orgs to request money for their event when someone else already has it, right? So essentially, student organizations have to spend at least 95% of their total allocations in order to be excused from this provision. That provision is that student organizations councils who do not spend 95% of their total allocated amount will be penalized 100% of their remaining funds allocated for the amount for the following academic year. So what that means is that if a student group didn't spend their funds, at least 95% of them, then whatever is remaining will be reduced the following academic year. So a student group requests $5,000, only spends $1,000, leaving $4,000 on the table. Then that means that the next year they would automatically be ineligible for $4,000, which would be really tough. So please be mindful when working with our student leaders to make sure that they understand how to spend. And if you don't, no worries. Our Office of Student Involvement is here to help you. Your comptroller is able to help you, and we'll pinpoint you to those correct people. Annual budget, as we've talked about, obviously that information is listed all right there. Okay. Next is our, there is a page missing. Hold on one second. Let me reshare and make sure that everything is loading as it should. Just one second. Okay, there we go. It was just loading a little silly, so let me get back to sharing my screen and then we will continue on with these SAFC guidelines. Great. So after we talked about annual budgets, we've already reviewed those. So now moving into travel. So travel, we do love the opportunity for our registered student orgs to be able to travel. And if they are competing, performing, presenting, or voting delegates on behalf of their registered student organization, their travel is essential. They must go to wherever this conference performance things are. That can be funded up to 65% of the requested amount. Last year, this was only set at 60%. So again, seeing those inflation rates change. But these, the total requested amount, the things that can be requested in a travel opportunity are the registration fees, the transportation fees, the flight information, and lodging. So that would be registration for conference or presentation, performance, whatever. Travel, which would be like train or any sort of transportation when you get there, rental car, things like that. And then lodging would be any hotels. And then the flight information, we've also done trains before, so trains are an option, but anywhere to get you from point A to point B. Again, they have to prove that their attendance is required. And if your attendance is not required for this travel and you still want to go for professional development or a volunteer trip on behalf of that student org, that can be funded up to 30% of the requested amount or $300, whichever is less. This was also used to be set at 25%. So seeing those inflation. One thing to note is that anything under 50 miles outside of the Kansas City area cannot be funded. And then also all of your travel can be looked at through Google Flights or Southwest, things like that. Just reasonable price should be available when submitting these budgets. All travel arrangements cannot be done on yourself. They are done through our Office of Student Involvement. We can help be your little travel agent to help you with booking, but this can all be done once your funding is approved. So that is it on travel. Moving into events, starting off with one of the most important parts about events, food. Food has to be itemized, letting us know where you're getting it from. One thing to note is that all registered student organizations that are hosting anything in the student union, you guys can use anything outside of Sodexo so long as it is under $500. If it is over $500, then you have to use Sodexo Catering. They have some fabulous options for food. I use them a lot for my student org events and they do a tremendous job. So something to be mindful of, but if you guys really want some Waldo pizza, you can get some Waldo pizza. Speaking of pizza, itemization for pizza is not required. Obviously, how much pizza a person can ingest is different per person. How many slices per person? That's kind of challenging, right? But still, as long as it follows these amount purposes, then we should be good to go. And that also goes the same for cultural food events. Food and catering will be funded for one general body per meeting and one social meeting per month. So one general body meeting is a meeting that student orgs have to get business done. If there's like a weekly thing, anything that is regularly scheduled business. The next thing that can be funded is for social meetings. This can be workshops, recruitment, leisurely activities, things like that. So you get to have 2 food events technically per month if you'd like, and one has to be for a general body meeting and one has to be for a social event. You can't have 2 social events funded for this semester or for that month. It would have to be one or the other. All of the food items have to include drinks, utilities, delivery fees, setups, gratuity, all of that included in our food allowances. And those allowances are for formal events or informal events. For formal events, those can be funded at $16.50 per person per meal. That was adjusted from $15 per person per meal. So seeing that inflation again. But formal events include anything from initiations, dinners with the guest speakers, award ceremonies, things like that. Again, $16.50 per person per meal. But these can only occur once per academic year. Informal events or social events can be funded at $9.50 per person per meal. This was adjusted from $8 per person in the previous academic year, but social events or informal events can be funded at $9.50 per person per meal. Food for volunteer can be paid through the student activity fee. We just cannot pay for anything else regarding that food or volunteer or philanthropy event. Okay. Heading into supplies and materials, this is one of my favorite provision in the SASC guidelines. So only academic and student involvement awards such as plaques, trophies, stoles, and similar awards can be considered for funding. So if you guys wanted to get your graduating seniors some stoles from as an appreciation for their involvement in your organization, that can be funded through the student activity fee. Honorariums, purchase agreements, or performance agreements, these are contracts created to bring folks to campus for your organization. These have to be complete by the Office of Student Involvement with your assistance. But these also, it is recommended to have these finalized prior to submitting your budget. This lets the activity fee committee know that who you're bringing in is not a system faculty or staff folk, that you have connected with that person, that you actually know their prices, things like that. Promotional items can be funded $2.50 per person per item. So if you want to give out pens or sticky notes, things like that with your student organization logo on it, you sure can at $2.50 per person per item. Goodie bags can be funded at $2 per person per item. The SAFC committee last year saw a lot of students requesting good luck on finals, study bags, things like that. And so we wanted to add in this new initiative in the guidelines. T-shirts can be funded at $13.50 per person per t-shirt. So this is a kind of similar with those stoles. This is considered a membership benefit. So yours and the per person is based off of the amount of folks that you have in RU groups. So please be mindful if your student organization has 15 folks listed in RU groups, but you want to order 50 shirts, you will only be limited to those 15 people that are listed in RU groups. The t-shirt design has to be pre-approved by the Office of Student Involvement. There is a t-shirt design approval tab also on the main page of RU groups, right near where you can find your MO code, a P card, and a purchase request. And t-shirts can also be funded once per semester. So you can get 2 t-shirts per year. Ticketed events and tickets for entertainment and team building events. This is one of my other favorite provisions in the SAFC guidelines. Those can be funded at $11 per person per ticket. So this could be for taking your folks to an escape room for a team building, or even going to a Royals game as a social outing for y'all. Of course, professional development is preferred, but it is determined on a case-by-case basis. If you guys have an event that has a ticket associated with it, this is the guidelines for that. If you feel the need to come into SAFC's meetings, again, that are held on those dates that are listed in the guidelines at 6 p.m. in the Student Government Association's chambers, you sure can. And this is kind of what those presentation guidelines look like. If you want to start a brand new organization during the 2023-2024 academic year, you can apply for what's called a seed fund, and that is $250 given to student organizations to help plant their seed on campus and grow in our community. So that is, again, funds that can be used during the year that you were formed. So if you were formed in that 2023-2024 academic year, you can request a seed fund. Appeals, this was something that we decided to put into the guidelines to ensure that our students knew the appropriate steps when wanting to request an appeal. There are different grounds for appeals and the steps listed there. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can connect with Justice Horn. He is our comptroller for this year. So he is the head of the Student Activity Fee Committee, and then the coordinator for leadership and student organization development serves as their advisor. So these two folks help guide the committee in their decisions, uphold any decisions made thereof. So the justice is just as knowledgeable as I am, and will be happy to help y'all as I transition. If you forget how to submit a budget request, it's all right there. These deadlines are something that I will also talk about here later, but annual budgets are all due by June 30th. So the end of June is when annual budgets are all due by. And then later on, there is the event by event deadlines, as I had talked about earlier. This is SAFC meeting times, things like that. So those are the SAFC guidelines for the 2023-2024 academic year. We are happy to, the committee is happy to assist you in making sure that you and your organization are ready to go for those requests. So let me go ahead and finish up here very quickly. I will share my screen once more. Okay. So we walked through the SAFC guidelines. We know what they are, and they are found on the main page of RU groups. Okay, important dates, June 2nd, which is today or tomorrow. when you're recording this, that's irrelevant, but June 2nd is the day that all spending from the 2022-2023 academic year ends. All remaining funds will be swept to the reserve account. As a reminder for next year, whenever the spending deadline is, whatever is left on the table is eligible for punishment for that student organization. So please be mindful of that for next year. But in planning and submitting annual budgets, those are all due by June 30th for both councils and registered student organizations, no later than 5 p.m. August 1st is when allocations will be distributed and communicated with our students through root groups, and then event by event budgets will open that day, and we will also be able to determine what that event by event limit is on August 1st. If you have any questions, first check out that SAFC frequently asked questions page. There will be a lot of the information that I talked about in this video. Contact your SAFC representatives. If you don't know who they are, connect with our SGA comptroller. Again, his name is Justice Horn. He is listed all right there. Justice is a current UMKC student, so we do ask that you keep their SGA life and their student life separate. So if you have an SGA related question, please just send that to the comptroller account so that they can help you. As I transition over to the Block Career Center, it is recommended that you don't reach out to me, but if you still do, that is okay. I will help guide you to the appropriate people as we move forward with my transition. So again, I would like to thank you all for attending, for helping support our student organizations on campus. Best of luck in your annual budgets or your event by event budgets. Can't wait to see what you all do in the 2023-2024 academic year in your student organization success and spending. Take care.